Alright guys, I'm here with Rod Collison. Today we're going to be talking about disc profiles. So a quick intro for Rod. Rod's an employment lawyer who specialises in workplace relations.
That's correct.
Rod, why don't you give us a quick rundown of who you are, what you do, and how you got into the whole disc profiling.
Yeah, thanks Dan. So as an employment lawyer, I deal with a lot of workplace conflict and deal with a lot of court cases where there's disputes at the end of employment relationships. And over the years, I realised if you sort of rewound back to what was really going on, it really just evolved from conflict that worsened and worsened to the point that it blew up and became this bigger than Ben-Hur thing with court cases. And so that really led me to be very interested in, well, what causes the workplace conflict and how do we resolve that in the first place at a much lower level? And that's really where I got into understanding a lot around personality profiling from HR manager clients. And there's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of good stuff out there like Myers-Briggs, there's Enneagram, there's a whole range of things, but they're very complicated. And unless you're really committed to it, the reality of managers learning this stuff and actually applying it practically is pretty limited. So when I discovered DISC, I was really taken by DISC's simplicity and how within a couple of hours people could be up and running and applying it on a day-to-day basis.
Very cool. Now, I first came across this stuff myself back in about 2011, 2012, I think it was, and had, I suppose, a sense of amnesia after initially thinking, yeah, this is really cool, and then totally forgot about it until you brought it up again. Rod is a member at my gym, and we got talking about this one day. I was like, fuck yeah, I remember that. So Rod actually ran a training day for our staff at GTT, and it was just a great reminder for me, and I probably realised its utility even more in how we can use it within the workplace, but more importantly, how it can be a great tool for people who are either involved in fitness or sport or anything where they're having to achieve to understand themselves and where they're going to come unstuck. Now, some of you are going to be listening to the audio of this podcast. So if you are listening to that audio, I would recommend that you Google disc profile, D-I-S-C. If you just go to Google Images, you'll get a visual of what it looks like. But for those who are watching today, I'm going to hold up this diagram. Now, I'll also post some stuff in the show notes, but we're going to just go into it a little bit more. Rod, if you could talk us through how the disc actually works and what each segment means.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think about it really simplistically, if you look at that circle, there's two hemispheres, a top and a bottom hemisphere. The top hemisphere is what we call the assertive part. So people who sit in that top hemisphere generally are more assertive. So by that I mean they see the world as having to deal with them. They step in a room and say, here I am. They like change. They're interested in challenges and they're interested in conquering their environment. People in the bottom hemisphere tend to be reserved. And so by that I don't mean introverted at all or unconfident. There's plenty of reserved people who are extremely confident. But by reserved, they tend to think before they speak. They prefer the status quo or they're just a bit slower to change, and that's because they either want to get things right or make sure that it's right for everybody. So that's basically the assertive reserved. And then if we look at the left hand side of the hemisphere, they're people who tend to be task focused, so they're more orientated around performing tasks, whereas on the right hand side, that right hemisphere, people who are more focused around other people. So if we bring that into the four quadrants, we have the top left, which is the high D, and by high we mean that people tend to be higher in that than the other three, and that's the combination of task and assertiveness. We have the high I, which is the influencer, which is the combination of assertive and people. Then we come down to the high S, which is the reserve combined with the people, and then lastly we have our high C, which is our task combined with being reserved. And so the DISC simply means direct, influencer, conscientious or compliant, or stable or steady.
Now, you talked about being higher in one element. You'll typically have one that you're higher in and then a couple of others that sort of compete for each other. Is that right?
Yeah, look, everybody will exhibit behavioural traits across all four. So everybody has parts of all of the components towards their behavioural style. But what we talk about being high in is that you would naturally exhibit the traits within that profile, whereas with some of the other profiles, you would have to adjust your behaviour or stretch yourself. So if you think about it, it's like if you're very high D, you can by all means exhibit high S behaviours, but it would like chew up your bandwidth. So you'd use up your bandwidth a lot quicker doing that. Whereas if you're high D exhibiting high D behaviours, that's sort of sitting in your sweet spot and you're chugging along, not using a whole lot of energy to achieve that.
Yeah. Now, the more I've thought about this and reflected on phases of my life, the more I get a feel for having been at different points through different parts of my life. So I think certainly in my early 20s, I was probably more to the I side of things. And I think at the moment I probably sit pretty much at the intersection of the I and D at the top. But certainly as I've got into running my own business and deeper into that, I've probably gone more around towards the C side and have had to follow processes a lot more and have things in place. But predominantly in that D segment. So is that a normal thing that happens depending on environment?
Absolutely. It's a good question because people will say, well, I once was a D, but now I'm an S. Look, the reality of it is that the research says there's very little variance with your disc profile over the years. So your disc profile will remain fairly fixed, but there's no doubt that depending on your stage of life and your environment that you're in, it can call for adjusted behaviour. So that's a very good example where you're saying, look, I'm naturally very I and D, but as a result of owning my own business, I've had to adopt a lot of C-type traits. So you can by all means exhibit a lot of those behaviours. It doesn't make you a high C though. In a sense, it means that you've got to consciously bring a high C game to the table to achieve what you want to achieve as a high D.
Yeah, gotcha. All right, so the good stuff now. Most of our listeners are going to be people who have a great interest in health, fitness, training, and the gym, or who are really actively engaged in it. How does this play out in the gym? You know, there's always the different archetypes getting around. What sort of activities are the different profile types going to be drawn to?
So if we firstly start with then, look, identifying what is my likely profile, you can go on the internet and there's plenty of tests and questionnaires that you can do that will give you a report. But for the purposes of just briefly talking through it today, a high D, having that task and assertiveness combined, they're very much going to be focused on getting shit done. So they're very results driven, my way or the highway. They're a bit like that Keanu Reeves movie Speed, where if the bus gets below 50 miles an hour, it's going to blow up. So they're just going as hard as they can to get to the destination, thrashing the shit out of the engine, chucking people off the bus, no time to look in the rear vision mirror. So I'm exaggerating a little, but just to give people a really clear idea of what a very stereotypical standout high D would be. So that sort of person in the gym, very results focused. They're going to be very much focused on what they want to achieve. They're going to have their presence felt at the gym. High Ds are naturally power seeking. So if they're people who are regular gym members, you'd expect them to know a lot of people in the gym. They might be helping out other people, but certainly when they're training, no time for chit chat. They're just busy getting shit done.
So headphones in, head down, ass up, getting it done.
Yep.
Yeah, not interested in small talk or fluffing around. Is there kinds of training or sports they might be more inclined to pursue?
Look, obviously a sport can attract anybody with a particular profile. Really the disc profile would indicate some, what people's baseline behaviours might be in a particular sport. So certainly the high S, which is the opposite of the high D, can have that white line fever. So they could be that very mild-mannered person, but as soon as they step into the arena, they turn into an absolute beast.
Right.
That's a good example of adjusted behaviour.
Yep.
To suit a particular situation.
Sure. Okay, cool. So really it's not going to have that much influence on that. Okay, what if we went to the high I? What are they going to look like around the gym?
So the high I, similar to the high D in the sense that very assertive, so They're very much going to be a bit more out there, but they're very people orientated. And so when you combine those two things together, look, firstly with a Higheye, you're probably going to spot them a mile off because they're going to have the coolest activewear on. They're going to have all the latest gadgets. They're going to be probably following the latest fad diets. You see them, they're massively into paleo. Check them out next time, they're onto ketosis. And they're pursuing it like that's the only thing in the world. They're very much going to be very upbeat, very lively, very friendly, but they really are I. So if you're having a conversation, it's the classic, look, enough about me, let's talk about you, Dan.
Yeah.
What do you think about me?
Yeah.
So those great ones where they have a good conversation, but it always does seem to get back to them. Now, they would argue against that and say, no, that was a great conversation. I was really interested in the other person. And they are. Eyes are very engaging and enthusiasm, which the enthusiasm sits on there. But they are very much about wanting to influence and persuade people. So you're going to see them at the gym. They're going to be pretty pumped up. They're going to be pretty aware of who else is in the gym and loving their networking. Very big natural networkers' eyes. So that's how you'd spot them around the gym. And look, probably, you know, how you meet people who, when you cook in the kitchen with them, doesn't matter if they're doing a basic meal, they've got shit everywhere, pots and pans, half the kitchen just to make one small meal. I think in the they're often Higheyes, and in the gym they're just going to have dumbbells, barbells, shit everywhere, just racing around. At times, perhaps lacking a little awareness of others and how they're impacting on others. So it's not that they're deliberately trying to be arrogant or anything like that. They just sometimes lack a little bit of awareness, a bit of spatial awareness.
One of the things that really keeps coming up for me about Higheyes is easily distracted. And distracting, and I see it all the time. And one of the, I suppose, the great paradox, one of the things I've been noticing is Higheyes make really good trainers. So they're really engaging and motivating in a lot of their sessions they run. And then the client goes, they pack up their bag and they leave the gym. And then every bit of equipment they used is still out in the gym. Their notebook is on the gym floor. They've left all their shit out. You know, they've left their unwashed smoothie container in the kitchen, and it's just a fucking disaster. There's stuff everywhere. But they're really there and they're really into it, and they bring that energy while they're doing the job. And then as soon as it's done, lights are out and they're gone.
They're the classic though. If they're interested in something, 110%. And the stuff that's boring in life and the details, just couldn't be asked doing it at all.
Yeah, I can relate to that a little bit. Yeah. Okay.
So another great one with the distracted and distracting. Higheyes have really hijacked the word awesome. So everything's so awesome that we now need a new word for awesome. And so they'd be fantastic pumping you up at the time. Then they'll promise you the new program, and a week later you're still chasing them and they haven't got around to following through and drawing up your program.
And there'll be a reason for that. No. I just wanted you to have another week, you know. Then you tie your shoelace up and say, "Oh, awesome work." Yeah, that shoelace needs to be tied up. Yeah, I've seen that. Okay, I suppose S is our next point of interest there. What do they look like around the gym? What are they doing?
So S's are really people orientated like the eyes, so they're both sitting on that right hand side, but they're more reserved. So like the eyes, they're going to smile, but being more reserved, you know, a little less eye contact, less intense in the eye, and far less self-centered. So the S's are the true ones that when they ask you how your training's going, they're actually waiting for your answer because they're actually listening to the answer rather than thinking of the next question or how quickly they can tell you about their training. So S's are really your classic reasonable, fairness, great team players, really focused on the group and how everybody else is feeling. And for them, it's really important when you're a high S to be connected to a group, to be part of the group, and for you to know that everybody in the group's doing okay. I guess in some respects you could say that the high S's are sort of your classic people pleasers.
Yeah, one of the really profound things and the useful things I've gotten out of this is whenever I walk through the gym, I mean, being high D, I'm very focused on what I've got to do. So I'll have a to-do list that's got 10 things on it, and I get into work, I'm like, I've got to do all this stuff. And I might have to go from my office to the other side of the gym to do something. And I used to get very much in the headspace of, head down, walk past everyone, do the thing, go back to my office and stay focused. And one of the things this has given me a real appreciation for is that there are a lot of high S's out there who just want to have that chat.
Yep.
And so it's taught me that, look, if it takes me an hour to get the job done or 90 minutes, the time is less important than actually just engaging with my customers and the people who come into that gym every day. So it's really helped me sort of understand the weaknesses of being a high D, or some of the pitfalls, and to just place a little bit more importance on the interactions that people are wanting to have when they come to the gym.
Yeah, totally. I mean, different perspectives, but to that high S, you could come across as an asshole.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm really not.
And really not at all. Absolutely not at all. And another high D wouldn't think twice about you walking past. There goes another high D getting shit done like me. But the S, they value that connection. So, look, unlike the I, we've got to be careful that the I doesn't just get you in the corner and chew your ear off. The S's just really need that connection. So as you say, just saying hello, how you going, checking in, asking how the training's going, and actually listening to the answer and not looking around the room for the next person to say hello to. Often, that's highly valued by a high S.
Yeah, it really is. It's so interesting, and it's funny because there are those high I's too. You've got to kind of walk through the gym like the Terminator, and you're realising that it's a jungle out there, and the high S's you can safely stop and have a chat.
Yeah.
You got to watch out for those eyes because they'll start talking, and by Jesus, good luck getting away. There's a few of them, in fact, that I've been out on the gym floor and they start telling me a story, and I'm thinking, fuck, where's this going? And so I walk off mid-conversation because I've got to get out of there with my life. I'll go back to the office, I'll have something to eat, check a few emails. I can still hear them talking.
Yep.
Pack up my bag, go back out by reception, get in the lift. I'm going in the lift and I can still hear them telling the same story. So you've got to be careful.
You've got to be careful. But look, S's are also, they're very good social observers. And so while you're going around the gym being really busy getting stuff done, they can actually be observing a lot of the dynamics that are going on in the gym and quite intuitive as to, how people are going and actual social dynamics. They're very good observers for that.
Yeah, as opposed to the I's. Okay, the C's. What are the high C's looking like in the gym?
So we're combining the reservedness of the high S. So again, like the S, the C's are going to think before they speak, a little bit more of the status quo. But because you're combining that with the task and not the people, you're really getting a much more analytical type person. So more thoughtful, more reserved, more analytical. So what does that look like in the gym? You're going to get somebody in the gym who's going to value competency and mastery. So they're going to be very focused, not just on getting the result like the high D. Now the high D wants that result, but it doesn't have to be pretty, right? Getting shit done is just getting shit done. It doesn't always have to be pretty. Whereas for the high S, the process is just as important as the outcome. So in terms of training, strict technique, actually mastering movements or activities, whatever that you're doing at the gym, that's very, very important to the high C. So if you're training a high C, don't give them a set and say do 8 to 10 reps. They'll say, well, hang on, which is it? Is it 8, 9 or 10?
Yeah.
Okay?
Yep. So these are the guys that will do well with percentage-based training, where every rep is dialed into a certain percentage. It's got to be very precise, and they'll have no problems following a 12 or 16-week program that's dialed into exact numbers. Or, if it's heart rate based training, they'll stick to an exact heart rate.
Yes.
They don't need that variety in their training. No. They don't need a sense of being entertained. No. It's just follow the process step by step.
Absolutely. And they're going to value mastery. They're going to value nailing it.
Yeah.
And they would tend to be quite happy training alone. So for the high C, it's all about that commitment.
Sure. All right. Very cool. Now, I think for me, the real value in this system has been understanding the interpersonal dynamics, how to approach situations with different people, but also in understanding how to play to certain people's strengths and what their weaknesses are going to be. Because really, this is all about high Ds like myself being able to manipulate other people into doing what's best for them. That's right, yeah?
Absolutely,
yeah.
And I's are very good at that as well.
Yeah, even better, it would be argued. So really, that was actually a joke, so don't take that seriously. Seriously. So really...
If you're a high I, you're not going to be offended because they're just going to say, well,
What's wrong with that?
What's wrong with that?
So, I mean, one of the things I've seen, particularly with the S's, is they tend to let everyone else's needs get in the way of actually looking after themselves.
Yes. Because they're worried about their groups and their stability, they can very much have the tendency, more than the other three types, to put other people's needs first. So in terms of training, they're the high S's. If you're a high S and you identify as a high S, you're going to be at that higher risk of sacrificing the session because you've got to grab the kids, you've got to do something for your partner, you've got to stay back at work, some other club you're involved in needs something done. You're going to sacrifice your training time, which is your me time. That's your time for yourself. You're more likely to sacrifice that to be meeting other people's needs.
Now, strengths. What do they do well? What do they make work for them in the training environment, in the pursuit of goals?
High S's are steady, so again, like the high C, they don't necessarily need a heap of variety and keep it fun and keep it interesting. They like the steady and the consistency of it. So they get into a good groove with their training. They're quite good at just sticking at that. And as I say, if that becomes their status quo, then that's a good habit to have that they'll continue to do. I think when you look at group training, the group training that you run, it really does naturally play to the strengths or the motivations of a high I and a high S, because for the I in particular, you know, it's about the variety and the fun of it, and the other people around with the networking. And for the high S, you can very much see there's the connections to be had with other people. And I think in a way, a really good tip for high S's to get involved in the group training is that they won't want to let other people down, because other team members will go, hey, I haven't seen you training for a while, what's going on? So in a way, there's a bit of social pressure that can be applied in a very positive way for the high S not to want to let those people down. So if they can define their group as in their gym group, then they don't want to let those people down. They want to be consistent and stable and steady with their training. And they're great people around the gym, because often you'll see them encouraging other people.
Yeah, so some really interesting points there. I mean, for those who are members at our gym, that they really will have noticed the difference in the kinds of people that are drawn to the different areas or to the different programs. So team training has been a big part of our gym, and it was something I designed based loosely on what we used to deliver when I was a PTI in the Army, and it was bringing that strength and conditioning type model to a general population, and understanding that most people, whilst they don't need to train like a high-end athlete, there's a lot of the tools we can take from that world which really benefit everyday people in getting them moving better, getting them stronger, getting them leaner. And the group environment just resonates so well with a certain kind of person.
Absolutely. So look, the group training can work for all the four types, but I think in particular I's and S's are really going to fare well in that group training environment. The D's being a little bit more wanting to be in control, maybe sort of less inclined to have the program made for them, that sort of group program, whereas an I is going to have no problem with not having to think about it, just turning up, give me something fun, give me something new, keep it upbeat. Yeah. And the S's are really going to value that consistency of the group training.
Yeah. The C's as well, the high C's, I find that they take quite well to team training. Probably more so with the way we do it, where it's not just an ad hoc group exercise program. It is a periodized program where there is a long-term view and you're building on phase upon phase. They tend to do really well at just coming along following that process as well.
I've noticed with the high C's, they'll certainly be asking more questions about the new program, and they're wanting the details, and they're wanting to understand, what's behind it. And look, as a general observation, because I've trained across all the different times in the group training, I would probably say the high C's tend to train in the earlier morning sessions.
Definitely.
Yeah. And they're much more committed, serious around the training. So they'll have a little bit of chit-chat before the session and a bit of chit-chat after the session. But like the D's, the C's, once we're training, it's just game on and very focused and very committed. Whereas I'd say that, sort of 5 o'clock after work slot, Plenty of S's and I's sitting around gas bagging and sometimes during training.
Yeah, the early morning groups, the 6 a.m. in particular,
Yeah.
there's accountants and there's
IT people.
IT people,
yeah.
economists, public
Yeah,
servants,
yeah.
people who are quite high up in public service. So there's a real type that go to that class.
Yeah, and you kind of have to earn, like the high Cs, they can be very friendly, but because they're reserved, you kind of have to earn it. So I found when I was going to early morning trainings, I had to go quite a few times before the high C would finally say, okay, you're coming enough and demonstrating that you're serious enough.
Yeah.
I'll now talk to you and include you in the in my circle.
Yeah, they're a funny bunch, aren't they? It ties in well to one of the other things that you taught us when you ran the staff training day, and it's how people who are predominant or dominant in one quadrant, how they will see others. And you explained something which really resonated well with me, and it was the C's will look at D's as always sort of trying to get one over them or manipulate them down a certain path. And I've had a number of interactions over the years where, being a high D, I've been trying to explain something to a high C or win them over to my way of thinking or to get them to do something. And I always had this feeling of them sort of not trusting what I was saying or not buying in. And I believe greatly in everything being a win-win. But I get really impatient when somebody's slow to make an action or a decision. I get quite frustrated by that. And that helped me understand that dynamic and how that goes.
Yeah, look, that I would say that's also really your inner high I there, Dan, straddling across the two. The high I is the polar opposite of the high C. And so even more so than the high D, the I is going to present that, what they see as being persuasive and influential. The high C is looking at that and going, well, the data would give us the answer, so why all the argument, why all the manipulating? So what a high I may perceive as influencing, the C just sees that as manipulating somebody. And so, it's important to understand that it's not a case that one's right and one's wrong. They're just different perspectives because people are just viewing the world very differently. The high D is going to naturally more clash with the high S. And so for what the high D sees as just okay behaviours that are just necessary to get results, high S's can look at that as aggressive, to crash through, not bringing people along. Again, it doesn't mean that all of those things are true, but they're just very different perspectives. Equally, the high D will often look at the high S and just say, you're indecisive, you're low energy, you got a fence post up your ass, you're sitting on the fence, stand for something.
Yeah. So it's fair to say that the C's and the S's need to better grasp the whole concept of working as a team and doing it my way. Yeah. Okay.
Spoken like a true high T.
No, it really is a great framework for better understanding that. Any other really important points with understanding this and how it plays out, or funny stories you've come across over the years?
I'd say just in terms of how it plays out at the gym, DISC is a really important tool for, firstly, self-awareness. Then there's the awareness of others, and then how to interact with people. So at that sort of back end there, it could be used to better interact with your trainers or other people that you're training with, and adjust in a way that makes more sense to them so you can go along better. But really that self-awareness is the critical aspect, because understanding yourself first is the most important. So, if you're a high D, even more so than the other quadrants, I think it's really important to have particular goals that you're trying to achieve. I see high Ds are great where I've known high Ds over the years who heavy social drinkers, party hard, eating a shit diet, carrying extra kilos, and then one day they decide, look, I'm going to start running. And then they start doing fun runs, then it's the half marathon, the marathon, give up the booze straight away, give up the shit food, and they seem to have zero problems motivation-wise doing that. And you're sort of going, but how did you go just giving up all that grog? No problems, mate. No problems. I just stopped. Because they've got a new goal, and then that's what they're doing now. So I think that's a really great thing around a high D, that they don't seem to have a lot of those same motivational issues around habit changes. But I think what happens is I've seen over the years, a particular high D I know, once they've sort of run all those marathons, done that running, and then kind of got bored of it, chucked the weight back on again and sort of went back to unhealthy lifestyle because there just wasn't a particular goal.
Yeah.
So whilst goals are important generally, I think even more so for the high D, actually having something to aim for, something to achieve is really important. I think if that's lacking, then the high D's are a real risk of falling off the wagon.
Yeah, so they really need something to go after. They really need that focus, goals beyond goals. Yeah. It's interesting you say that at our Christmas lunch this year at Alana's family's house, because they're Russian. There was a friend of the family there, a guy who had actually lived in the Soviet Union until 1995 or 96, and was well and truly into his working years by then. I said to him, look, what was it like living and working in a communist country? And he said, look, the only real difference was that all the guys who are entrepreneurs now, big business owners or medium and small business owners, probably more to the point, during communism they were alcoholics. Because they had nothing to go after, they had nothing to put their energy into, and they had nothing to really sink their teeth into. So they were despondent alcoholics who were just disillusioned with their life. He goes, everyone else, they went to jobs every day and just went through the motions, and if you got fired from one place, you go down the road and get a job at another because there was full employment, but you didn't really work. And I found that really interesting, just at a society level, and it sort of ties into what you just talked about.
Absolutely. I mean, look, you think of the high D like a great white shark. The shark needs to keep swimming, and it's always hunting. It's always what's its next thing that it's doing. Whereas there may well be other sea life that you'd be quite happy sitting at the bottom of the ocean being comfortable. For the high D, that's purgatory.
Yeah.
A state of perpetual comfort.
Yeah.
So that sort of goal setting, really important, and it can be quite challenging if you say you're a high D and you've played really competitive sport in your 20s, you might be in your 30s, you're now doing gym training, but you don't have that same level of goal setting, something to go after results wise. That can be really difficult.
Sure. And general tips for high Ds in just getting along better with other people and not being seen as this arsehole, pushy, domineering power player?
Look, the stuff that you put in place is great. When you said earlier about just stopping and checking in with people, saying hi and checking in, people will appreciate that from you. You don't need to become all touchy-feely. That would be insincere. So it's all about just the 25% less, what we talk about, just toning it down. So just stopping and checking in with people, just asking people what's important to them, as opposed to just, pushing on with what your agenda is.
Take a breath.
Yeah, absolutely. Just take a breath and slow down a little bit.
Cool. And in the same vein, high Is, what do they respond best to? What tends to put a bit of steam in the engine for them?
Classic for the high I is the variety, keeping the training interesting, keeping it upbeat, working with other people where you can. They're very social creatures. Look, in some respects, it's probably not a problem at the high Is onto all the latest fads, if that's what keeps them motivated. But the self-awareness to realise that if you are of that sort of propensity, then just being able to tone that down a bit and try and get a bit of consistency in your training and what you're doing, but definitely keeping it upbeat, keeping it interesting, and keeping plenty of variety is really important for a high I. Again, the group training is, I think, really good with the high I, because locking in those times means that they're less likely to get distracted and not go to the gym. If they're left too much to their own devices without enough discipline and structure around them, then they're just going to naturally go rogue. Yeah. Whereas those high Cs are those natural list makers. They've got lists and they check them off. Yeah. I once had a high C when I delivered training, challenged me in the group and said, actually, I'm high C and I don't write down a list every day and tick it off. So that must be wrong. And I said, oh, okay. Well, often when a high I wakes up, they get out of bed, it's like a blank slate. And they'll think, what can I do that's fun today? And what do you do? And the high C said, oh, no. I wake up every morning and in my head I know the tasks that I'm going to perform that day. I'm going, great, okay, so you've got a mental list.
So he
You
just
have a
lost his
virtual-
pen, yeah.
Yeah, the virtual list.
It was that the Rain Man, was it? Okay, now for high eyes, helping them get along better with others and maybe tone down some of that high eye
Yeah,
behaviour.
totally in the gym. I'd say just consciously bring a little bit more gym etiquette.
Yeah,
You know, wipe down the sweaty bench, put stuff away. Do you really need to take up such a big space?
yeah.
Or can you actually reduce the space that you're consuming while you're
Listen in.
exercising? Those things, they're just awareness of others, and they're just kind of manners or, you know, basic gym etiquette. And definitely, you know, toning it down. So if you're a high eye and you have some insight now as a result of this disc, be mindful that you going up and chatting, particularly to a high C who's trying to work out, is going to really piss them off.
What was the analogy you gave? The dog analogy.
The puppy dog. So
Yeah,
sometimes the high eyes, they're like that puppy dog that licks your hand, and they just cannot understand why the other person finds that so fucking annoying. You're pulling your hand away going, that's gross, but the puppy dog's going, how could you not be loving this?
Yeah,
How could
yeah.
this not be the best thing ever? So the high eye, you know, putting up all the Facebook posts going, here's me doing the most banal activity, and just genuinely believing that everybody else will be like really interested in that because that's what you're doing and you're interested in it.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you also be interested in it?
They always make me laugh because like you'll see them at work in the morning and you go for lunch and you come back in and they're high-fiving you, giving you hugs like they
Yeah.
haven't seen you in 5 years. It's
Yeah.
like, fuck off, give me some space here, you know? Give me some room.
Yeah, very tactile, lots of hugging, lots of high-fiving.
Yeah.
And so, look, that's great for the high eyes. So, you know, you give them their credit. There's some really good social glue in the gym and make people feel really upbeat. But, again, if they tone that down 25%, nobody's going to think they're unsociable.
That's right. Okay, the high S's, how do we get them to come along?
I think the high S's, really importantly, blocking that time out in their calendar and really making that untouchable. That's your time, and you really need to think of your gym commitment just like your work commitments, just like your family commitments. It's a commitment to yourself, it's high priority, and it's a boundary that other people need to respect. I mean, if you had to go to a doctor's appointment, people wouldn't be asking you to blow that off to do something else. And I think you need to think of your gym appointments in the same way. That's your preventative health.
Sure.
So really for those high S's, you really got to value the boundary of this is my time, I'm booking these appointments in, and then turning up. You know, generally speaking, you know, once the high S turns up, there's no problems, you know, being motivated to train.
Yeah, it certainly becomes a point too. You know, they've got that outward focus on having to look after everyone else,
Yeah.
and one of the things I always invite them to do is just realise that all these people that depend on them being healthy as well.
Yes.
You know, so I think the classic case of this is one we see a lot is the mother who's raising children, who's got a husband at work. I know this is a very stereotypical example, but they're putting everyone else
Yes,
before
first.
them, and then next thing they know, they're in their late 30s or mid 40s, whatever it may be, and they have literally done nothing for themselves.
Yep.
And that can lead to a true crisis where they really are good for no one.
And I think the group training is really ideal for a high S. I know I've said that a few times, but that's where they're going to form connections, and there'll be some real stability to be had there.
Yeah.
Whereas I fear for the high S, you know, turning up and just doing your own program by yourself
Doesn't work.
is really not going to be sustainable for a
No.
high S.
No, they do it for a week or two, if that. Yeah, and C's.
C's are pretty good. Once they commit, they commit. As I said, that they want to know all the details. They want to research everything to the nth degree. So they're pretty reliable like that. As I say, they work pretty well in the group training, so particularly in the earliest sessions, which probably have a more of a serious vibe. They're also people who can very happily train by themselves, as you said, doing long programs over a long period of time, not getting bored. I think for the high C, sometimes it's just seeing the wood for the trees and not getting too bogged down on the process and not losing sight of what their overarching goals are. I think sometimes what I've noticed with high Cs is they can overcommit to the gym, where that can become counterproductive.
Yeah. That's the thing, overcommitting to the gym.
I think you've talked about overtraining and
Yeah, look, it's. I mean, one of the observations I've had of the Cs is sometimes they get so focused on everything having to be so perfect that they overlook what the actual objective is.
Yeah.
You know, training is only ever a means to achieving something.
Yep. So what's the something?
Yeah. What's the something? Are you doing enough to get there? You know, for most people, the gym is about just improving their general health and well-being. And sometimes having a sleep in is going to be better than actually getting up early and going to training.
Yes.
You know, little things
Yes.
like this. You talk to this high C customer who's talking about, you know, I'm training really hard and I'm eating perfectly and I'm just so tired and, you know, I come to training, I get up at 4:30 to get into a 6 a.m. session every day, and it's like, why don't you have a sleep in? Why don't you train 2 days on or 3 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on? Just have a little bit of that recovery built in, and you can see the cogs ticking over in their mind. They're like, what? Sleep in? Get up later? It just, they really struggle with that.
Yeah, I've got a friend who's high C, very committed trainer, will train at 6 a.m. even when they're sick, and often we'll see them get to the point where the body just shuts down, and they've got ill, and the body's just said enough's enough. But there's just that difficulty to tone it down, and I think the other sort of trap or thing to watch out for the high C is that if they can't do it perfectly or competently, then they don't do it at all. So I think you've spoken a lot as well about, you know, playing the averages and the longer game, whereas the high Cs can really beat themselves up if they're not doing it to that required standard, and then potentially throw it away because I can't commit perfectly, then I'm not going to commit at all.
Yeah, that's a really funny one. I see that more with the nutrition side, and funnily enough, I see it a lot in business too. So on the nutrition side of it, I don't train anyone really anymore, but I do a lot more sort of coaching, where I'll sit down with people who are having problems, help them troubleshoot through what the obstacles are they're facing. And a really common discussion I have with the high Cs, even the S's, is we'll sit down and they'll say, well, you know, I'm not sure whether I should be having 1,800 calories a day or 2,100 calories, and I'm not sure, I'm not sure whether I should be eating meat or what kind of meat or how much, and there's just this obsession with the finer details. And I say, look, it doesn't actually matter, you know, like if you have 1,800 calories a day and you're looking to lose weight and the weight's coming off, well, it's working. But if you're feeling tired, have a little bit more. It doesn't have to be so precise. What matters far more is that long-term average. And they go into these cycles of obsession on things that just lead to overwhelm, and then them throwing everything out the window. So that's the really common sort of maladaptive behaviour to nutrition. In business, I see, I've got one friend in particular who I've got in mind who's brilliant at what he does, but really bad at putting himself out there in business, particularly with social media, because he's got all this great info in his head, but he's just overthinking what it is he needs to share to be of value. And really the golden rule with social media is just give your followers value, you know, give them relevant value. And he's thinking up here in the clouds when really he needs to think in the dirt and just do it. And if you put something out there that doesn't really get traction, so what? Doesn't matter. Put the next thing out, the next thing. And as a result, they end up just doing nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that 80-20 rule in particular is really good life hack for the high C, that you know, you are going to get 80% of your result from 20% of your effort. And so often, you know, the effort required to take it from the 80% level to the 100% level is disproportionate. And the high Cs can sometimes really struggle with that. So if you sort of tell them, look, near enough's good enough, even just saying those words to the high C, they will cringe.
Yeah, they die.
What do you mean near enough's good enough?
They die. I was actually teaching that to one of our trainers who's a really high C, and I was saying when you demonstrate an exercise, when you're teaching someone an exercise, the most important thing to remember is that everyone's got a different learning style. So you'll need to address, first you want to find out what their learning style is, whether they're a visual learner, an audible learner, or a kinesthetic learner. These are the main things we want to address. I said if you've got a group, you need to demonstrate an exercise appealing to each learning style. So you need to give a demonstration for the visual, an explanation for people who learn by listening, and then get them to do it for the kinesthetics. And I said, now, the trick to that is you're only allowed to give 3 main points. So you show 3 reps, you give 3 verbal cues, and then you have to get them to do it. And he had this absolute meltdown around, what? You're going to teach a deadlift by only giving them 3 points?
Yeah.
And it was just this full meltdown. And it comes down to the fact that if you give any more than 3 main points, 1, they're not going to remember that. People can only remember 3 things. 2, you start eating into the time that they actually need to do the movement for you to coach it. And everything beyond that 3 points just becomes superfluous information that no one can actually use. So, yeah, that was a good one. It's a funny one to see. Once the C's get their head around these things, though, they tend to be really good at them. That's my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So the toned down 25% advice for the high C is learning just what you said there, you know, keeping it a little bit simpler, knowing when near enough is good enough, not over-analysing, over-detailing something. And again, if you're high C, you bear in mind if you're coaching, you know, particularly high I, S, they're just going to switch off to this. They're just going to switch off to all that detail. So is the high D. Remember, the high D is just wanting to get the result. The high I just wants to get on and have fun with it. They're not interested in all the detail.
Get to the point. Get to the point. It's like me at Harvey Norman yesterday when we bought a new barbecue and the guy starts telling me about all the details. Like, mate, don't worry, I'm going to buy it, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas if that same guy was selling to, say, Alana, who's high C, she want to know or understand all the details and how does that compare to other barbecues and what are the safety features and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think the actual conversation went down the line of me saying, no, don't worry about all that shit, I don't care.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, well, I have to tell you all this because I have at least 10 people come back every day because I've missed one detail. And
he sounds high C.
Yeah, I said, mate, I ain't coming back. I promise you that. So just get to the point. All right, cool. I think we've covered some really good stuff here today, Rod. If look, a lot of the people, or I know there are some people who watch this podcast who run their own businesses who may be able to benefit from your skills in helping them sort out their workplace or any conflicts. Where can they find out more about you, or where can they get in touch with you if that is the case? Best point of contact?
Yeah, but Page Seeker Lawyers, and I'll send you the details to post.
Sure. All right, so in the show notes, I'm going to put a link here for doing a disc profile yourself if this is something that interests you. I'll also put a link to Rod's website, so if you would like to use his skills in your business or your workplace, you can do so as well. Thank you so much for coming along today. It's been a great chat.
Thanks, Dan. Pleasure.
Cheers, mate.